Hello and welcome to the first episode of News from the Gelding. My name's John Chapman and I'm the author of a fantasy novel that's going to be released soon by the name of James of Galendar. Now I'll be talking about the book later on, but the way I'm going to structure these videos from now on is that I'll begin by saying what I've accomplished or not accomplished during the preceding week, and then I'll move on to whatever I'll be talking about. Now, the problem is I haven't done very much this week. I had 2 migraines. I occasionally suffer from them, and I've had a headache pretty much every day for the past week since I last talked to you. Got one now, but not too bad. I think it's on its way out. So I haven't done much. The 2 main things I have done. One of them was I created the intro. I wasn't going to make an intro or do anything quite so polished. I mean, it looks fairly polished, I suppose, compared to what this will be. Yeah, I was tinkering with video editor and found some royalty-free footage, and I found a nice track, the nice bit of music by a chap called Marcos Bolanos. Nice, really nice work, and he was very kind and allowed me to use it for my videos or for the intro. There's a link below if you fancy checking out his stuff. Keeps going out of focus, is that because I'm doing that? I don't know. The other thing is I'm working towards getting another job. Well, I've been accepted for the position. Previous to this, I worked a couple of years as an ambulance car driver doing patient transport, and a couple years as a taxi driver doing similar work and normal fares. But for the last year, I've been using my savings to dedicate all my time to writing and everything associated with my books. But my money has been rapidly bleeding away, so the time has come to get another job. I'm going to be doing school runs for vulnerable children and maybe some other social care driving. And so it won't be many hours and enough money perhaps to break even at the end of the month. So, but it's going to allow me to carry on working. Writing whilst working full time is very difficult. It can be done, but I want to put everything into writing now. So that's what I'm doing. So let's get to the main subject here, the book. So before I talk about the book itself, I thought I would talk about why I decided to write in the fantasy genre itself. And for this I need to go back to the 1990s when I was a teenager. This was before Game of Thrones and Lord of the Rings films, all these things that have made fantasy quite so popular now. Then it was the domain of the geek, and that was me, and still am. And it was a place to escape from reality. I didn't enjoy school one little bit. It was quite unpleasant at times, and it allowed me a place to go. And so I started dabbling then myself, writing, just the odd little scene, whatever it might have been. I remember one was just describing a tavern and everyone sitting peacefully drinking, and then loads of people coming in and a massive fight breaking out. Just something, silly things like that. And but I had no idea, no ability to write a book, a whole book. It was way beyond me. So I would just dip my toe now and then, just to, just for the pleasure of it. Then later on in my 20s, I dedicated my life more to art, to fine art. I did a degree and then a master's degree, and I gradually moved away from traditional painting and drawing and was more interested in video and more conceptual art, installation-based work. I won't go into that now. I may talk about it another time if you fancy it. But very quickly, as much as I loved it and was passionate about it, I realised I wasn't going to be able to make a living, and if it was going to be very, very difficult. And by this point I was already in my early 30s, and I just felt as though that was going to be a long haul, and at the end of it maybe nothing would come of it. So I decided to do that, maybe continue doing that in my spare time and move on to something, another creative endeavour. And that's when I came back to writing. And what I did was I started writing a book about a solo cycle ride I did across Japan when I was 24. And it was quite an adventure. And at the time I kept a journal, and I thought, well, I'll write a book, or try to write a book based on that for my family. So that, I imagined I'd do it as a present and everyone could read about what I did in more detail. Quite self-indulgent, but that's why. But it took me so long to write that I realised, well, it was the ebooks were becoming, more of a thing, and I realised, well, I could possibly self-publish it, which I did. I haven't read it since, and I don't know how it stands up. Perhaps not very well, but it was the first book I ever wrote, and I felt an amazing sense of accomplishment, because I just never imagined I'd be able to write a whole book. In primary school, I was in remedial English. I was 2 years behind in my reading, and I think that instilled within me an inferiority complex in terms of writing, and so I was always good at drawing, so that's what I pursued in my life. But then when I finished writing that book, I realised I did have some ability. Whether or not it's good enough is debatable, I don't know. But anyway, it stuck with me after I wrote that book, and fantasy it's always been in my mind, as a place to go to. So forward to 2014, around about that place, and I found myself in a fairly bleak point in my life where things all fell apart. Excuse me. Nice cup of tea there. And so I moved to another city where I am now, Exeter, in Devon, in the southwest of England. New job, living in a little bedsit, tiny little place. And I had a sense of freedom. I enjoyed that. I kind of enjoyed being alone, but I was also lonely, that kind of stuck between the two things. Anyway, one weekend I was sat on a bench in Cathedral Green outside the Exeter Cathedral. Really lovely place. People like to go there for picnics and whatnot. I was there alone, And I had my journal, and I just found myself jotting down little ideas about a story. And I think these things have been swirling around in my head anyway. I'd been thinking about it. But it took this moment of calm to nail them down. I even drew a little map, a little fantasy map. Got to have a map. But it was rough, you know. It was just very, very basic, but the backbone of what could be an interesting story. And so that's what I ended up doing. And I'm not going to say writing was therapy for me, but I suppose in some ways it was. It allowed me to distance myself from the pain I felt, and the low point, and immerse myself into something beyond myself. It was the last thing I thought about when I went to bed. I'd close my eyes and I'd be there. It was really nice. I'd wake up thinking about it. I would get up a couple of hours before I started work, and I would get a few hundred words down. I'd take my computer with me to work when I was doing ambulance car driving, and I would do a little bit during my lunch break, or if I was waiting for a patient to be discharged from hospital, that kind of thing. And I would do it right up until the moment I fell asleep again. But even so, it took me 2 years to get the first draft done, which is a very long time. And then when I started working as a taxi driver, the hours became even worse. But I spent the time polishing that book to the point where I was happy with it, and I thought it was good enough. So, all in all, this first book took me 4 years. I know, some authors. I'm very well aware of the fact that a lot of authors spend a quarter of that time, less than a quarter of that time. But time was in short supply. So, where was I? Crikey. A bit more tea, that'll help. Oh, I've totally lost my train. Yeah, sorry. So that's why I started writing fantasy again. Now, before I get into the book itself, I'll tell you what the book isn't. Because I know some people have expectations of what fantasy might be. They're looking for certain things. Mine may not have those things, and so you may not be interested. So it's kind of a warning, I suppose. It contains a lot of tropes common to Western fantasy. There's a hero of sorts. There are mountains and forests. There might be magic, strange creatures, interesting races, lots of different races. But there are no elves or dwarfs or fairies, and there are no dragons. I'm sorry. But there's some creatures that are just as terrifying as dragons, perhaps more so. Anyway, I wanted this world to be different. I wanted it to be completely different. Well, not completely different. As I've said, there's definite similarities. Sorry. There are the main race. They're called Gelders. They live in a giant forest, but they're not immortal. They don't speak a different language. They look completely different to elves, the Tolkien elves. Anyway. The other thing is, the story is almost entirely told from the perspective of one character. A man from our world who finds himself in another world. And it would be quite easy to draw a correlation between me and wanting to go to another world. But the character isn't necessarily me. Well, it isn't. But, as aspects of me within that character. Anyway, that's beside the point. The problem is with telling a story from that one perspective is that you can't have simultaneous things going on. It's all through the eyes of that one character. That is, it can be limiting. Well, it's not limiting. You've just got to be more. It's a different way of working. You've got to be more concise with the path you take through it. You can't be quite so. I don't know. Grandiose with, I don't know, having lots of simultaneous threads weaving in. Well, I have got simultaneous threads, but it's a different. I'm not explaining it very well. Anyway, the other thing is that one character who's called James isn't a typical hero in any way. I thought it would be interesting, perhaps, if this is a common trope of a prophecy of a chosen one, that the one that's been chosen is the wrong one, and he's very aware of it, but no one else is. Some of them are, and I thought that'd be interesting. He's not particularly likable in the beginning. He's a coward, and he's kind of selfish, and part of that is because he doesn't believe that it's real. And so I think, as the reader, even me as the writer, I'm not entirely sure whether it is real or not. I mean, I've got my own. I know, I know, but it could be either, I suppose. Anyway, so right, I'm sorry, I've been rambling here. If we get to I'll get to the actual book now. So I'm not going to go into too much more detail because I'm already rambling like as you can see. So what I'll do is I'll read the blurb I wrote for it, and it would have been good if I'd prepared it beforehand, but I haven't. That's how polished this is. Right, here it is. I'm not very good at reading in a kind of dramatic sense. I'm just going to read it. But this is the story in a nutshell, kind of thing, where it frames it. When James Gelding entered the doctor's office, he was prepared for bad news. What he didn't expect was to be given a death sentence. The brain tumour was slowly killing him, and his only hope for survival lay beneath the surgeon's knife. On the operating table, he counted down from 10 and waited for what might be the end. When he awakes, he finds himself in another world of towering mountains and endless forest. A wicked arrow nails him to a tree as a beautiful scarred warrior moves in for the kill. His life will be spared by the girl's enigmatic father, Lord Galen, but only because he believes James to be the saviour for whom they have been searching. In a world in which the age of the magician is long dead, a supernatural force threatens to engulf the land and enslave its people. With the help of Lord Galen's daughter, Leander, James must brave the forests of the Gelding in search of the only man who holds the key to their salvation. Whether it is a figment of his imagination or the impossible truth, it is no longer his life, only his life, in the balance, but the fate of an entire world. So there we are. Yeah, so, in future things, in future editions of News of the Gelding, I may talk about in more detail, but for now I think that's probably enough. By next week I'm hoping to have a release date ready for it, but I'm still, I've been held back a bit with this migraine, so I'll get back to painting this week and I'll have a rough idea of when it will be ready. It's going to be an oil paint, so I'm going to have to wait for it to dry in between layers, so it might take a little while, but I'll have a rough idea of when it will be ready, and it will be, I'm presuming, within a month, 1 month or so. But anyway, if you're interested at all, subscribe to here if you like, and I'll keep you up to date with how it's going, or you can follow me on Instagram and I'll pop up a notification that it's been released or whatever. Yeah, I better keep it. I've already done one of these videos already and it went wrong because I realised I wasn't looking at the camera, I was looking at me, which I don't like doing anyway, but anyway. So right, that's all for now. Thanks for watching if you have watched this far. Have a nice weekend and a week next week, and I'll see you on Friday if all goes well. Yeah, so cheerio.